Hello, class. Take out your notebooks and do your warm-up. We have a lot to do today.
Hey. Hey!
What?
Why do we look like this?
What do you mean?
Well, we all look scared. I have 12 fingers. I don't even have eyelids for crying out loud. How am I supposed to blink? How?
Calm down. That's the way the creator designed us. We were made in a computer program, you see? That's why I can do this.
Oh, right. Gotcha!
So today, I'm going to teach you a few strategies to help you with your reading comprehension through the use of reading comprehension
Comprehension God.
The first strategy is called 5 W's and H strategy. For this, we are going to use a text on the Peloponnesian War. Here's some background information. After the Persian-Greco Wars in 430 BCE, Athens and Sparta went to war with each other over power struggles in the Mediterranean. Athens used their naval power, and Sparta used their military superiority. Lewis!
What?
Put your phone away. Thank you. Sparta used their military superiority in a set of wars with an eventual Spartan victory. Just in this short introduction, we have a significant amount of H's and W's, otherwise known as who, what, when, where, why, and how, of the Peloponnesian War. For example, the who are the Athenians and Spartans. The what is the Peloponnesian War. The when is 430 BCE and for 30 years. And the where is the Mediterranean. We also have why and how the war was fought. The why and how can be used for assessing your reading comprehension, but I'll explain that a little later. Now let's look at a text. For this assignment, Lewis! Put it away! For this assignment, we're going to look at a primary source, written by the Greek historian named Thucydides. The first thing we want to do for this strategy is read or skim the text, and underline any of the 5 W's or H's that you find. Underneath the words you underline, you can write which category it belongs to for organization purposes. Now here's where the reading comprehension that I mentioned earlier comes in. You might have noticed that for this example, I did not underline any whys or hows in the text. That's because I like to use these as comprehension or checkpoint questions. There's 2 ways that I would use this for an assignment. In the first, you have to get into small groups and read the text, underlining all the W's and H's you see. You come up with comprehension questions of your own that will be shared and answered in the large group. The second way, I'll give you a worksheet that'll look something like this. Notice that the boxes are only for who, what, when, and where, and that the how and why are used for reading comprehension questions at the bottom of the worksheet. Of course, this strategy could also be utilized by simply underlining all the H's and W's that you can find in the text, or writing them all into a graphic organizer. But it's always nice to shake things up a bit. Capiche? This type of strategy can pretty much be used for any kind of text, especially those that have a lot of names, dates, or places, like a textbook does. Take this section from a National Geographic textbook, for example. A W&H scavenger hunt could be a pretty useful tool for annotating a text like this. Let me explain. A short skimming of the reading will show that there is a massive amount of H's and W's within only 3 pages. In fact, there are about 2 or 3 per sentence on average. So asking you to go through and find as many W's and H's as you can would be pretty redundant. So instead, I would give you something like this. A reading guide scavenger hunt that asks you to look for specific W's and H's in the text and write a definition or description based on the context clues. For example, one question on the guide could be something like, why did many city-states join Sparta against Athens? Or, who was Pericles? Or even, when did the war start and how long did it last? All these questions could be answered just by using the textbook and the guide that would help in identifying the key points that I want you to take away from the reading. Any questions? The next strategy we're going to take a look at is called Lewis. Phone. Thank you. It's called a 3-level reading guide. For this one, we're going to use the Declaration of Independence. Here's some background. On the eve of the American Revolution, on July 4th, 1776, rebel colonists called the Second Continental Congress and met all over the 13 colonies in the State House in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. There, Thomas Jefferson wrote and signed the Declaration of Independence, along with 55 other members, in order to announce their separation from the British Empire. So, a 3-level reading guide is usually used for more challenging texts to read, which is why we're using it to read the Declaration of Independence, a document that is generally viewed as a challenge due to its writing style and heavy vocabulary. The aptly named 3-level reading guide is split up, as the name might imply, into 3 levels. Level 1 focuses on the first 4 W's in the previously discussed strategies. This level is used to focus on key details in the text. An example of a Level 1 question might be something like, how many people signed the Declaration of Independence? Or, what are some of the grievances outlined in the Declaration? This is the most basic level of reading, and the levels get progressively more challenging as they go along. The second level focuses on students' ability to interpret text. This level is used to guide students into comparing and contrasting pieces of a text, or to help students organize a sequence of events. Some example questions for this part could be, summarize a list of grievances in the Declaration of Independence, or compare and contrast this document with the Declaration of Sentiments and Grievances. The next level, Level 3, focuses on the application of information in a given text. This level is used to help students apply their knowledge into new situation
or set of circumstances. An example question for this level could be something like, rewrite the Declaration of Independence to include issues that our country faces today, or evaluate the writer's attempt to apply liberation to all people. Make sense?
How could you use this as an assignment?
Good question. There are a couple of ways that this could be used as an assignment. More specifically, as a reading comprehension guide.
Reading comprehension guide.
A graphic organizer would do nicely here, with questions from all levels to make sure that all skills are sharpened during this reading. One way that I could use this strategy is by splitting the class up into 4 groups, each of which will receive a reading guide with 1 or 2 questions from each level to answer cooperatively. Once the groups have answered all questions, you would then share the questions and answers that your group worked on with the class. Any questions? The next strategy that we're going to cover is called a concept ladder. Lewis, put it away or I'm taking it! For this strategy, we're going to use texts on the Declaration of Rights and Sentiments and the Seneca Falls Convention. Here's some background. In 1848, a group of women's rights activists led by Elizabeth Cady Stanton organized a meeting at Seneca Falls, New York, where they wrote and signed the Declaration of Rights and Sentiments. The document received 100 signatures and sparked many future women's rights conventions and campaigns. One of the most famous points of the Declaration argued for women's suffrage, something that they would not receive until 1919. Now, a concept ladder is a graphic organizer that serves a similar purpose of an anticipation guide, meaning that a little background information is given to you, the students, and you then have to form questions or anticipatory statements that you think will be covered through further reading or research of the topic. Now, you may be wondering why it's called a concept ladder. Well, that's because the graphic organizer that the questions go into looks like this. Perhaps the name concept staircase would be more accurate, but for the sake of keeping on the same page, I'm going to stick with the term concept ladder. There's a couple of ways that we can use one of these as a reading comprehension guide.
Reading comprehension guide.
The first is pretty straightforward. I would give you a graphic organizer that looks like this, and read a short description of the topic to you, like the background I just read for the Seneca Falls Convention. As I'm reading to you, you have to fill in each level of the ladder with questions that you think will be answered with further reading. You can also fill in levels of the ladder with pieces of information from prior knowledge or connections to past lessons. For example, you could fill in one step of the ladder with a connection to the Declaration of Independence. You would then go on to read more documents, articles, or other texts to answer the questions that you asked in the ladder. This could be in the form of a web quest, or I would supply text for you to use. In this way, the concept ladder functions as a graphic organizer for your notes on a particular subject, while also helping you to form comprehension questions for a text. The second way to use a concept ladder is by plugging in questions from the previous strategies discussed that the students would then need to answer while they read or search for texts. For example, I could give you something that looks like this, which would be a different way of organizing the other strategies that we discussed. I could also just put the sentence starters, so you have to form the rest of the questions yourself. Notice that as the ladder goes up, the sentence starters get more complex, just like the 5 W's and H, and the 3-level questions get more complex. Any questions? So the last strategy that we're going to cover is called a tag, or a textbook activity guide. For this one, we're going to use the home front during World War II and Rosie the Riveter as context. Here's some background. During World War II, women and minorities were turned to work in the factories in place of the men that were sent overseas to fight. This sparked a slew of women's rights and labor movements and women's empowerment propaganda in the form of Rosie the Riveter, which also had a secondary purpose of persuading women to purchase war bonds in order to defeat Nazism on the home front. So a textbook activity guide is another reading comprehension guide that focuses, as the name might imply, on helping to read textbooks. Since textbooks throw out a lot of information all at once, with no indication of what is very important or what is just nice to know, a textbook activity guide can be used to help you, the students, pick out the most important pieces of a textbook reading. There are, once again, a few ways that one can be used as a reading comprehension guide.
Reading comprehension guide.
In the first, the students will receive something like this. This is an example of a textbook activity guide based on this chapter of our textbook, which covers the home front during World War II. On the guide, notice how there is a key on the top of the page that explains the types of symbols that will be used. These can be anything, including directions to skim a certain part, directions to discuss a section with a partner, directions to write a response about a particular piece of information, or even to further research a particular statement. A textbook activity guide also gives page numbers for where the answers to the questions can be found, so that students do not have to closely read a full chapter of a textbook. Another way that this can be used is by simply giving the students guided reading questions for a text, which will tie into a WebQuest activity. For example, I could give you something that looks like this: a WebQuest textbook activity guide that has you look for answers on the internet to questions raised from the text. For example, this piece from the text mentions that Rosie the Riveter originated from a song by the Four Vagabonds. So the WebQuest question tasks students with looking up the lyrics to the song, or listening to the song with a partner, in order to answer the questions that follow. A textbook activity guide can take on many forms, as long as it guides the student to the most important pieces of information from a textbook. For example, a textbook activity guide could also look something like this, or like this, or even like this. All of these strategies can be used with each other, so don't be alarmed if you see the 5 W's and H in a concept ladder, or a concept ladder with questions from the 3-level reading guide, or a 3-level reading guide in the form of a textbook activity guide. They are interchangeable and can be used in numerous ways that I haven't mentioned in order to form a reading comprehension guide.
Reading comprehension guide.
Well, that's all, folks. Tomorrow we'll be using some of these strategies to read the Bill of Rights. It'll be fun. Reading comprehension, guide.